Hello. Thank you very much for your interest in our interview series of our film festival. Today, we will talk to Alison Jane Wilson, the actually writer, director, and producer of the film The Girl from Salonika. Thank you very much for joining us today. And if you'd be so kind to start with why you have produced this kind of film.
All right, thanks so much. The Girl from Salonika, it centers the life of Mazaltov Fofo Bahar. She was a Greek survivor of the Holocaust, and she was actually one of the few to survive Nazi medical sterilization experiments at the notorious Block 10 in Auschwitz, Birkenau. I really wanted to tell her story because I had met her grandson and also her son here in Barcelona. And I just heard what an extraordinary woman she was. And what attracted me most is her children, which, she was able to have despite everything. Mm-hmm. They had been raised without any hate or any prejudice. Which is something truly astounding. And she also had another element of the story is there was a prisoner doctor in Auschwitz who had actually decided to go against the orders of Schumann and leave Fofo with an ovary because their experiments were via X-ray, and they were trying to sterilize by literally rotting the insides of these women. So via his act of sabotage, not just with Fofo, but several of the other young Greek girls, because they were 15 to 17 years old, a tiny little group of them survived. So I interviewed two of them, and I decided to work with Fofo and also to publish the film in Spanish as well. She still was actually a Ladino speaker. Her son commented that everyone used to say, "Oh, her Spanish is very strange," when they're speaking as a family. So it was just a really, really interesting story from a historical point of view, but also there's a lot of humanity in the story with her as well. So I felt really obliged to tell it, and I'm really happy that I did work on the project.
Yeah, it's really a tough topic, and it was so interesting to see how she spoke about this topic and how she and as you said, she's such an extraordinary woman. May I also ask a little bit further, how did you meet her? Did you have the topic in mind, and did you search for a contemporary witness, or was it on?
Yeah. I actually had the topic in mind. There's a resource center in Barcelona that deals with all victims of the camps and fascism. Majority of them are victims from the Franco era in Spain. But I went into this particular center in English. It's Friends of Mauthausen and other camps. And I started speaking with the resource officer in there, and then and then he told me actually his grandmother was a survivor, and that he was writing a book on the topic. And then we started chatting, and I wrote a treatment, and then started pitching for funds and things like that. So I didn't find any other Holocaust survivors in Spain, particularly who had been victims of experiments as well. And I also wanted to look at the effects of intergenerational trauma as well, because I know that really hadn't been touched upon, and also medical ethics, because actually Fofo used to speak to medical students here in Spain, and there's a course on Holocaust medicine and ethics at the University of Madrid. And she would tell them, you know, that she was testament for what happens when doctors lose their humanity. Yeah, lots of interesting angles in the film as well. I know a lot of people are very interested in this gray zone of the prisoner doctor. Was he a collaborator? Was he a savior? Because Fofo and some of the other victims named their children after him. I've read other books and theses that, you know, people see him as a devil because he did collaborate and perform a lot of very heinous experiments, which is also mentioned in the film. But for this particular family, there was a nurse, a head nurse, that seemed to have a little bit of control over him, and she could say, hey, you know, these girls are very young, you're very old, think about what you're doing. And also he had a wife and daughter in the camp as well, so was he, you know, he had to think about keeping his family alive as well, which ultimately he lost his life for saving others. So yeah, I found it a very disturbing topic, obviously, to look at, but also very interesting as well.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And you have already mentioned all these different aspects you included in your film. And it's so interesting to see, as you said, how this relation to collaborator developed and all this stuff. So it's there's a lot inside this film. I have to say, it's a very
Yeah.
emotional film as well. Do you have any personal connections to this topic? Why you chose to make a film about this? Is
Well, my father was actually a World War II veteran as well, so I was very connected to the trauma already, and it's something Carlos and I talked about roughly around the same age. I was about 8 when my father started telling me these stories, and he was about 8 as well when his grandmother started telling him these stories. And the only thing is there was a little bit of distance with her and her father, because her father, Carlos's father, David, would start to get very upset when she'd start to talk about it. So there was the distance and a different type of relationship between grandmother and grandson. So yeah, I had always had a lot of Holocaust survivors around me, a lot of various refugees from various wars as well. I'm from Australia originally, so you know, quite a multicultural society with lots of different stories.
Yeah, and it's also very, on my part, it was also very interesting to see. You already mentioned that you are Australian, and often World War II documentaries are quite limited to a geographical area next to Germany or something like that. Is there also a specific reason why you chose to name the film "The Girl from Salonika"? Because this is also very interesting that she was actually from, or she is. This film was is on the topic of someone from Greece, and also you mentioned the country then a little bit. Was there any certain reason for that?
Just that so few survived, and there aren't many stories out there, true stories about the Greek survivors as well. Like you mentioned before, it's mostly the European theatre. Focusing more like on the Ashkenazi Jews, not so much the Sephardim like Fofo was. A lot of people don't know they had such a rich, vibrant community there, such an ancient community. I was looking for some Ladino speakers, but again, it's like a dying language. I wanted to include more Ladino in the
Yeah.
film. I
Yeah.
actually found more speakers in Argentina.
All right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
obviously Israel.
yeah,
Mm.
and I think it's I hardly heard some Greek in the film, so it was very interesting. You mentioned this multicultural
Yeah.
aspect as well. Yeah.
Well,
But
it was interesting. It was interesting because I asked Carlos. One of the first questions was, "What languages did she
yeah,
speak?"
yeah.
And he said Ladino with her husband because
Of
that was the language of the Sephardi.
course, yeah.
Um, her son spoke a little bit of Ladino, but lost it when they moved to
hmm
Spain from Brazil. I guess. I
hmm
mean, Spain having to absorb Catalan and Spanish, you're going to lose a language basically. Serious matters, French between each other.
Yeah. All right. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there was the Alliance Israelite, the group of schools that they went to.
hmm
So I do believe she spoke Greek, but it wasn't a language that they
Yeah,
spoke at home, which
of
is
course.
interesting. And
It is.
also with her Catalan, as well. She was very hard to translate
hmm
because
hmm
she'd be mixing some Spanish and Catalan and some Ladino words in there. And we'll be
Yeah.
like, is that a Catalan word or a Ladino word?
Yeah.
Which was interesting as
hmm
well. I also read some of the memoirs left by her husband,
hmm
which were a bit of a mix as well between Spanish and Latino.
hmm
Really, really interesting
Wow.
to
Yeah.
read as well. The stories, especially when they went back to Greece after the war and
hmm
how they were looking for somewhere to start again, and there was nothing left.
Yeah.
Everything had been taken. There was no family left. They didn't have any connection anymore to
Mm,
Saloniki, to
mm,
Salonika. Yeah.
I see. Mm. And you also mentioned in your in the description that you believe that documentaries can highlight injustices.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this opinion as well? Because this also was very interesting to read from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I made a feature film on human trafficking as well, and it
Mhm.
was showing not just the illicit crime, which people become very fascinated with,
Yeah.
uh, or like the recruitment, but also the recovery.
Mhm.
So I really wanted to give a really intimate look at at who she was, what happened to her, and her
Mhm.
later on in life to get people thinking. And I especially liked screening the film to, grades like 11 and 12 when they have a lot of coursework on this sort of thing.
Mhm.
I've
Mhm.
had some social inclusion students um, watch my films, and I really love all audiences are fantastic, but when they really
Mhm.
get engaged and start to think differently, because then they are going to put themselves in someone else's shoes, and that is what sparks change when the empathy is there,
Mhm.
basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I also love untold stories as
Mm.
well. So,
Yeah. How long did it take to make this film?
mm. uh,
Difficult question.
yeah, well, I mean, I spent some time researching. We also went to Auschwitz-Birkenau and had access to Block 10, which hasn't been filmed
Mhm.
before,
Mhm.
which you see that is the original operating table
Yeah.
in Block 10.
Mhm.
And upstairs there was like sleeping quarters where Schumann would literally go upstairs and pick his material.
Mhm.
Like, so the girls were upstairs literally like lab rats kept
Mhm.
in this area, like a large dorm above the hospital, and also at Birkenau. So specifically with Block 10 in Auschwitz, we visited. We didn't go to Greece because the family felt like there was nothing there for them. So the rest was really researching, working on archives, and really trying to tailor the film so represented Fofo. And I wanted people to be able to see her humanity and some hope in there, not just, you know, these atrocities.
Yeah.
And that it is possible not to hate. Like David specifically says, he's like, I should hate Germans, but I haven't been raised that way. My mother put herself in the hands of psychologists. They taught me not to be afraid to, you know, of this or that. And
yeah,
it's
that
something
was.
very, very marked in that family, which is very different. Because I have interviewed people for other pieces of work, war-related, and they are quite a rarity.
Yeah.
So that's why I really wanted to include that in the film. So long story short, roughly a year and a half from conception to completion. We know with documentary, funding's always an issue.
Okay. Yeah. Have you shown it in Australia already?
No, not yet. Not
Okay.
yet. So we released it in January, and it's going to have a New York premiere next week. June 5th at the Party Film Festival there, which I'm really happy because they've got quite a small Greek community there. Obviously, your festival, another festival in Germany, and I'm also speaking at Auschwitz Medical Review in Poland in September. So there has been a lot of interest from the medical community, which is really, really interesting as well.
Yeah.
Australia, I guess I haven't organised any community screenings there because I haven't lived there for a long time. But there are some smaller Jewish festivals and things like that, which I imagine it will screen at.
All right. And how was the feedback from where you showed it already? How was the reaction from the audience for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Mostly what an extraordinary woman.
Yeah.
And what an extraordinary family, that, you know, people had no idea that that there was a Greek Jewish community to begin with. You know, inquiring more, to learn more about Holocaust medicine.
Yeah.
It's not medicine, that's what I'm using the commas.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and ethics. So I think people have told me they often think about it for a few hours in the afternoon after they've seen it. Even though it's a short 36 minutes, there's like quite a bit to unpack.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's a lot like that with historical and educational documentaries. You have to watch them sometimes twice or very closely.
Exactly.
And there's always something you think, oh, I should have added it in there, but you also can't make it too dense that it's like an information dump for people.
Yeah.
It's still a movie, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. We could continue to talk, but
Yeah.
I think we have to come to an end. You already mentioned that you made another movie about human trafficking. If I understand correctly, yeah. What's your next project you are in at the moment?
I can't say too much, but it's another war film. This time a feature, and it's set not in the European theatre, but I'll come back to you and tell you more about that, because I think it would also fit into your festival.
Would be great, yeah.
At a later stage, but yeah, a larger budget, definitely, and Yeah.
Very brilliant to hear.
All right.
So I wish you all the best for that.
Thank you, Ronan.
And thanks very much again for being part of our festival.
I'm really happy
And
to. Thank you.
I'm looking very much forward to your future projects. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.